Hello, I want to read you this book today, which is a favorite from when I was little. And now I liked the stories and the illustrations. The Adventures of Madalene and Louisa, pages from the album of L and M.S. Pasley, Victorian Entomologists. I'm going to read you the foreword first so you have some context for the stories. And this note is from Tim Geel. My great-great-aunts, Madalene and Louisa Pasley, were born in 1848 and 1847 respectively, the youngest children in a large Victorian family. Their father, Admiral Sir Thomas Pasley, Bart KCB, had been flag captain to the Admiral of the Fleet in the Crimean War, and during the years covered by the album was Admiral Superintendent of Devonport Dockyard, and then Commander-in-Chief at Portsmouth. The pictures in the album were drawn by the girls between the ages of 12 and 16. I do not know why they chose to draw themselves rather like middle-aged spinsters, but presumably it was a private joke. Whatever their reasons, I think it adds a delightful touch of eccentricity to the humor of their most original album. All right, you see these? There's their pictures. When we were young, my sister Madalene and I preferred chasing beetles and butterflies to lessons in the schoolroom. We explained to a series of daily governesses that we would rather study entomology than arithmetic, but none of them were interested in beetles, and all of them persisted in setting us sums. We escaped by getting up early and setting off on expeditions before their arrival, or staying up half the night to watch a chrysalis change. The governesses were annoyed when we fell asleep over our lessons. They complained to Papa of our idle disposition, and subsequently left. Papa did not like being bothered by governesses. He was Admiral Superintendent of Devonport Dockyard, and he had many important things to think about. Here he is with his tall flag lieutenant striding round the dockyard discussing repairs to ships of the line. Yes. And making arrangements for dinner parties and croquet matches. As long as he put off finding new governesses, we were able to go on entomologizing and even make daring night expeditions. One day, he remembered we were on our own and asked our elder sister Georgie to keep an eye on us. Madalene and I did not get on with Georgie. She had been sent away to a school where she was made to drink quantities of calomel, which had made her sour. That's her. That's them in the middle. She thought we were spoilt having lessons at home. Worst of all, she disapproved of entomology, especially at night, and whenever she came out with us, it was bound to rain. On Meadfoot Sands, we left her sitting under her umbrella and found staggering specimens of seaweed. Madalene caught a giant crab, or would have done if Georgie had not willed it to find a hole in the net. On our next expedition, we took the fishing rods Papa had given us, but Georgie did not approve of that either and refused to join us. Fishing. She infuriated us by taking Mr. Raleigh, her pet goldfinch, with us on expeditions, and when we were not looking, offering him the beetles we had caught. Madalene decided to get even with Georgie and let out Papa's fierce parrot, who terrified Mr. Raleigh out of his wits. After that, Georgie refused to have anything to do with us, and we were on our own again, except once when Papa asked Stevens, one of the dockyard men, to accompany us. But Stevens was even less enthusiastic about entomology than Georgie or Madalene's dog Joe, who was always imagined our latest finds were teasing him. Joe found beetles as bothering as bath night, and though Madalene was always thinking up ways of distracting him, they seldom succeeded. Papa was still too busy to find a new governess, but one day he did take us on his yacht, the Fire Queen. He took Georgie too, and perhaps that was why it was stormy. Georgie went below looking sourer than ever, and we played our violins to prevent ourselves thinking of seasickness, but were soon overcome and had to be put off at Dartmouth. There they are playing their violins. In 1862, we left Devonport for the Lake District. And there they drew a little map. Delighted to be back at the Crag, our home near Lake Windermere for the summer, and fortunately still without a governess, we entomologized night and day while Georgie fussed about indoors. The flowers we found near the Crag were more exciting than any we had seen at Devonport, and in the light of the lantern, quite ordinary moths and beetles looked larger and more interesting. We determined to make the most of our freedom. One day we harnessed Blunderbuss and set out in search of adventure. Madalene noticed some huge glowworms flying past and decided to catch one. She used her whip to secure their leader, but he tried to escape with the assistance of one of his relations and dragged his feet to show his indignation. Meanwhile, I encountered a great green grasshopper and yelled for Madalene and caught him by the leg. But the great green grasshopper sprang into the phaeton and drove off without us. That summer we had many other strange adventures, some of which are recorded here. The oil beetle. Number 1. We encounter an oil beetle. It possesses the property of exuding an unpleasant-smelling oil when surprised or touched, hence its name. Eventually, all the oil sank into the ground, and the captors returned home in triumph. The dragonfly. The dragonfly resists all attempts at capture. Joe joins the fray and grabs him by the leg, whereupon the dragonfly sheds all his legs, enabling us to tie him up and pull him through a stile, and finally push him in through the window. This adventure is called The Unknown Larva. See those? Grand discovery of a hitherto unknown larva. We remove his dinner, his flight, we stop him, and then he becomes a solid body. Solution of the difficulty? In captivity? The ferocious animal escapes? Tableau. That means it's over. Here's their story about the privet hawk caterpillar. We find a privet hawk caterpillar in a tree and dislodge it. It almost escapes, but agrees to a lift. They put it on a donkey here, during which a transformation occurs. Finale. At the end of the summer, Papa told us that since we had been unable to find a suitable governess, he had engaged a drawing master called Mr. Philip Mitchell. To our dismay, Georgie was to have drawing lessons with us. Georgie admired Mr. Mitchell and wanted to please him. She told us we were not to tease him just because he felt the cold and went sketching with a cape and rug. Needless to say, Mr. Mitchell had no interest in entomology and wanted us to draw Lake Windermere. It was not difficult to creep away from Mr. Mitchell, leaving him all alone. Occasionally, Mr. Mitchell would come and catch us both, or one of us, and then the other, but often he gave up in despair, and we could seek further adventures. Like this one, where we discovered the rare larva. We discover a beetle larva in a dead tree. With great effort, it is secured in a collecting case. It, however, bursts the ends out, and another method has to be adopted. Mr. Mitchell enthused over Lake Windermere and asked us to row him out to see the sunset. He wore his top hat and recited a poem which Georgie thought romantic. The trip was such a success that we took him out again. Without the boatman with us, we soon found interesting company. Lots of bugs. But Mr. Mitchell appeared not to notice anything unusual, even when Joe fell in, and Georgie complained about the beetle we had asked her to hold. Madalene thought how amusing it would be if Mr. Mitchell were to join us in some of our adventures, and she drew what might happen to him if he did. Mr. Mitchell begins to sketch on, as he thinks, a log of wood. It proves to be a looper caterpillar, and toward evening it rises erect to sleep. Louisa and Madalene procure a ladder. The caterpillar feels tickled and doubles half up. Further endeavors at rescue. By a sudden jerk, the caterpillar throws Mr. Mitchell to the ground, and he is carried home by his pupils on a ladder. But when Mr. Mitchell saw Madalene's drawings, he was so angry his whiskers went stiff with rage. He said we would never learn to draw Lake Windermere, or anything serious for that matter, and much to Georgie's regret, he gave in his notice. After that, Papa decided that we were too old for governesses and too idle for drawing masters, so we were able to entomologize as much as we liked with no one to bother us. We caught a great number of rarities for our collection and spent hours studying the habits of sportive ichneumon flies. Until we left Windermere for Portsmouth, where Papa had a grand new appointment. Then Papa said I could help him arrange parties and croquet matches, which I did, though it always seemed to rain. And Madalene could write books about butterflies and beetles with proper illustrations, which she did, but nobody liked them as much as the album. The end. In the postscript, it says that Madalene married Sir Henry Jenkins, who was parliamentary counsel to the Treasury from 1886 to 1889. She founded and for many years edited the Mothers' Union Journal, a quarterly with a circulation of over 200,000 copies. Madalene died in 1939. Louisa never married and died in 1929. Both sisters remained keen entomologists and artists all their lives. The crag, where their adventures took place, was demolished in 1968, and a state of modern bungalows was built in its grounds. Of course it was. I hope you enjoyed this book, and if you liked the adventures of these bug-loving sisters, you might also like the Hilda series on Netflix, and maybe also the movie The Extraordinary Adventures of Adele Blanc-Sec, which is a great little steampunk movie and involves a pterodactyl. So have a good day and take care out there. Bye-bye.